A violent thunderstorm rolled across the English countryside, swallowing the afternoon beneath walls of charcoal cloud. Rain hammered. Hundreds of black umbrellas gathered around a freshly covered grave, where 23-year-old Alara Ashcroft knelt motionless, her gloved hands pressed into soaked earth as though she might hold her mother there forever. Beside her, Dr. Edmund Ashcroft, England's finest village physician, stood with quiet dignity, although grief bent his shoulders more cruelly than age. 10-year-old Oliver clung to his sister's sleeve, asking in a trembling whisper why mother would never answer again. No comforting words reached Alara. Every heartbeat echoed with unbearable finality. Mourners slowly drifted away, leaving flowers, silence, and endless rain. Then an old blind fortune-teller emerged through the storm, leaning upon a polished ash cane. Several nobles laughed. Others crossed themselves. She ignored them all, walking directly toward Alara. Without speaking, the stranger placed a weathered sealed envelope into Alara's trembling hands, gently closed her fingers around it, and disappeared back into the rain before anyone dared stop her. Confused murmurs spread across the cemetery, yet Alara scarcely noticed. That evening, inside the modest family cottage, she finally broke the faded wax seal. Her mother's familiar handwriting greeted her like a final embrace. The letter confessed that generations of Ashcroft women had feared a mysterious hereditary illness that awakened after childbirth. It had stolen her mother's strength, then her life. She believed Alara might carry the same hidden burden. Every sentence pleaded with heartbreaking tenderness. If you discover this illness belongs to you, never marry. Never let the man you love bury you while your children still need your voice. Alara's tears blurred the ink until the words seemed to dissolve into the candlelight. She pressed the letter against her heart, unable to breathe beneath the crushing weight of imagined tomorrows. Before dawn, she gathered every marriage proposal she had carefully preserved, including the ribbon from an earlier engagement she had never accepted. One by one, she fed them into the fireplace, watching hopeful futures curl into blackened ash. When her father found her, he reached for the letter, but she quietly folded it away and forced a fragile smile. She refused to burden him with another impossible fear. Instead, she devoted herself to helping at his clinic, comforting frightened patients, playing the piano for lonely children, and filling every spare hour with service, believing kindness might silence longing. Her grandmother Margaret welcomed her often to the Little Rose Cottage, where blossoms climbed every fence despite harsh winters. The elderly botanist would gently remind her that the strongest flowers bloomed after cruel seasons. Alara smiled politely, yet secretly believed some flowers were never meant to bloom at all. Only Amelia, her dearest friend, knew the truth hidden inside the folded letter Alara carried everywhere. Again and again Amelia urged her to seek certainty instead of surrendering to fear. Again and again Alara refused, insisting uncertainty itself demanded sacrifice. If even a chance remained that her mother's fate awaited her, she would never gamble with another person's future. Months became a year. Her gentle laughter faded behind careful distance. Suitors quietly stopped calling. The village admired her compassion, yet whispered about her strange refusal to accept happiness. She welcomed every rumor because they kept hopeful hearts away. Winter eventually yielded to spring, and an invitation arrived for London's Royal Charity Ball. Her father encouraged her to attend simply to perform the evening piano recital supporting orphan hospitals. Reluctantly, she agreed, promising herself she would remain invisible. Lady Sophia Ravenshire, the Duke's younger sister, noticed her brother lingering near the entrance, unusually silent despite greetings from influential guests. Mr. Hawthorne, the elderly butler who had raised Adrian, quietly observed the change with knowing eyes. Adrian acknowledged everyone with measured courtesy, yet his attention repeatedly returned to the young pianist arranging forgotten sheet music while reassuring nervous orphan children waiting backstage. Nothing about her sought admiration. Everything about her offered it freely. Something deep within the disciplined soldier shifted, not with sudden passion, but with the quiet certainty that destiny sometimes arrived without fanfare. He simply watched, unaware that the folded letter hidden against her heart would change. Across the glittering ballroom, however, a calm, clean-shaven Duke watched her kneel beside a frightened servant girl, offering comfort instead of applause. For the first time in many lonely years, Duke Adrian Ravenshire found himself unable to look away, while Alara unknowingly tightened her fingers around the hidden letter resting inside her gown. Construct Section 2, the Duke who chose kindness instead of pursuit, with a clear, emotionally resonant narrative that introduces the main characters and establishes the central conflict. Use a vivid and varied vocabulary, ensuring every sentence either advances the plot or deepens character insight. The section must be 650 words, no more, no less. Maintain a focused structure with no extraneous scenes or details. Everything included should serve the story's immediate emotional and narrative goals. The section should deliver a satisfying emotional arc on its own, a sense of movement or shift, while leaving the reader eager to continue. Avoid headings or chapter titles. Prioritize cinematic pacing, sensory richness, and subtle character development over exposition. Ensure that the final paragraph offers a soft cliffhanger, powerful reveal, or emotional punch that ties back to the conflict introduced. Don't ask me any more question, follow the given info. Morning sunlight spilled across the gardens outside London's orphan hospital, where dew clung to every rose like tiny crystals. Ilara sat beneath an old oak tree, mending a little girl's torn shawl while humming a gentle melody that made frightened children smile. She never noticed the tall man watching quietly from across the courtyard. Duke Adrian Ravensshire had attended only because the charity supported wounded veterans and abandoned children, yet within moments he understood why everyone around the young physician's daughter seemed calmer. She possessed no dazzling performance, only a quiet gift for making lonely people feel seen. Adrian introduced himself with polite restraint after the recital ended, expecting the formal conversation every noble usually offered. Instead, Ilara thanked him for supporting the hospital, curtsied briefly, and excused herself to comfort an elderly widow struggling down the chapel steps. She gave the old woman her own shawl without hesitation, then disappeared into the gathering crowd before Adrian could continue speaking. Rather than feeling slighted, he found himself smiling. Her kindness had not been performed for his approval. It simply belonged to her nature. Most men of his rank would have answered fascination with grand bouquets, glittering jewels, or lavish invitations. Adrian chose another path entirely. If Ilara valued compassion above appearances, then he would never attempt to purchase admiration. He would simply become useful wherever goodness was needed. Within days, villagers noticed the feared Duke repairing the leaking roof of the orphanage alongside local carpenters. Children laughed when rain finally stopped dripping onto their beds. No announcement carried his name. He quietly left before anyone organized speeches of gratitude. A week later, Dr. Edmund Ashcroft discovered anonymous payments settling the debts of families unable to afford medicine. He suspected generous benefactors, never imagining the Duke himself had visited the clinic after sunset, asking only that no patient be turned away because of poverty. Oliver's admiration grew unexpectedly when older boys cornered him outside the village school, mocking his patched coat and calling his sister strange. Before the frightened child could answer, Adrian calmly stepped between them. He neither shouted nor threatened. One steady glance from the decorated military strategist dissolved their courage, and they scattered without another word. Afterwards, Adrian knelt, dusted Oliver's sleeves, and spent the afternoon teaching him how confidence often spoke more loudly than anger. The seasons gently stitched new memories together. During summer, Adrian helped elderly farmers lift heavy harvest baskets beneath endless blue skies. Autumn brought peaceful picnics where he listened more than he spoke while Ilara identified wildflowers gathered by grandmother Margaret. Winter wrapped the countryside in silver, and he laughed quietly as Oliver convinced them all to skate across a frozen pond. At Christmas, he carried forgotten gifts to lonely widows, then stood unnoticed at the back of the church while Ilara's piano filled the sanctuary with hope. Every beautiful moment became another invisible wound inside Ilara's heart. She admired the Duke's patience, his humility, and the effortless tenderness hidden beneath his disciplined exterior. Yet each act of goodness only strengthened her resolve to remain distant. The folded letter never left the pocket sewn inside her gown. Whenever happiness tempted her, she touched the worn paper and remembered her mother's final plea. Loving Adrian no longer frightened her. Burying him beneath unbearable grief did. From the shadows, Lord Cedric Blackwell observed everything with growing resentment. Once convinced Ilara would eventually accept his proposal, he now watched England's most respected Duke earning affection without demanding it. Jealousy hardened into quiet calculation. Rumors would be easy to plant. Pride could be manipulated. Hearts could be broken. Unaware of the storm gathering beyond their peaceful days, Adrian looked toward Ilara beneath a field of sunflowers and made one silent decision. He would ask for permission to court her, believing sincerity could succeed where rank never would. News of the Duke's quiet devotion spread through drawing rooms, market squares, and palace corridors with astonishing speed. Aristocrats whispered that England's most disciplined noble had surrendered his heart to a physician's daughter who seemed determined never to notice him. Ladies mocked Alara's plain dignity, insisting she must secretly crave attention. Gentlemen questioned Adrian's judgment, claiming power had clouded his reason. Every rumor carried Lord Cedric Blackwell's invisible fingerprints, carefully placed until suspicion became fashionable conversation. Alara endured every insult without defending herself. She accepted cruel glances as punishment she believed she deserved. Amelia pleaded almost daily for her to reveal the truth hidden inside her mother's letter, but Alara refused each time. She would rather have the world misunderstand her than watch Adrian lose the woman he loved after bringing children into the world. The burden remained hers alone. Lady Sophia Ravenshire observed everything with quiet intelligence. She noticed how her brother never complained after another rejection, never answered mockery with pride, and never allowed bitterness to touch his voice. She also noticed something no one else saw. Whenever Alara believed herself unobserved, her eyes searched every crowded room until they found Adrian. Only then did she breathe easier. Hatred never looked so heartbreakingly gentle. Winter arrived with glittering frost and crystal chandeliers illuminating the royal winter ball. Nobles filled the magnificent ballroom beneath soaring ceilings painted with angels and victories of forgotten kings. An orchestra played elegant waltzes while laughter floated through the golden light. Yet beneath the music lingered eager anticipation. Everyone expected the Duke to make his intentions known at last. Adrian crossed the polished floor with calm, measured steps. He wore neither arrogance nor desperation upon his face. Instead, there was only quiet certainty. Reaching Alara, he bowed respectfully before the watching crowd. Every nearby conversation dissolved into silence. Even the orchestra softened until only trembling violin notes remained. "Lady Alara," he said gently, "may I have the honor of courting you?" The words were simple, sincere, and offered without pressure. For one impossible heartbeat, Alara imagined saying yes. She imagined spring mornings beside him, children laughing through blooming gardens, and peaceful evenings listening to his quiet stories. Then her fingers brushed the folded letter hidden inside her gown. The dream shattered before it could breathe. She forced herself to lift her chin. Her voice emerged colder than winter itself. "Even if you were the last man on earth, I'd never love you." A collective gasp swept through the ballroom. Fans froze halfway across painted faces. Crystal glasses remained suspended in trembling hands. Someone quietly laughed, then another followed. Within moments whispers spread like cracks across thin ice. England's most respected duke had been rejected before the highest society in the kingdom. Adrian did not flinch. He did not defend his pride. Instead, a faint, almost tender smile touched his face. Looking directly into Alara's tear-filled eyes, he answered with only 9 words. "Then I'll simply spend forever proving your heart beautifully wrong." Silence returned, deeper than before. The laughter faded as though swallowed by the enormous hall itself. Nobody understood why the Duke looked neither humiliated nor defeated. They saw only a man refusing to surrender hope. But Sophia saw something entirely different. As Alara turned away, one silent tear escaped despite every effort to remain composed. In that single glistening tear, Sophia recognized a truth hidden from everyone else. Alara was not running from Adrian's love. She was running from something that terrified her far more than love itself. Across the ballroom, Cedric watched her leave and smiled quietly, believing the broken hearts before him had created the perfect moment to begin destroying everything else they cherished. Cedric wasted no time turning wounded pride into calculated cruelty. Within days, anonymous articles appeared in influential newspapers, claiming Duke Adrian Ravensshire had abandoned reason for an ambitious physician's daughter seeking a noble title. Other stories accused Dr. Edmund Ashcroft of accepting secret favors in exchange for introducing wealthy patients to the Duke. Every lie was carefully woven with enough truth to appear believable. Society eagerly embraced scandal, proving that gossip often traveled faster than justice. The village changed almost overnight. Patients quietly stopped visiting the Ashcroft clinic, fearing association with whispered disgrace. Mothers pulled their children away when Alara walked through the marketplace. Shopkeepers who once greeted her warmly now avoided meeting her eyes. Oliver returned home bruised after older boys mocked his sister, insisting no respectable gentleman would ever choose someone so shameless. He tried smiling through the pain, but Alara saw tears he desperately hid. Even Grandmother Margaret's beloved rose garden became a target. Unknown vandals trampled blooming flowerbeds beneath heavy boots, snapping months of careful growth into broken stems scattered across muddy paths. The elderly botanist knelt silently among the ruined blossoms, gathering damaged roses with trembling hands. Instead of cursing those responsible, she whispered that cruel winters always tested the strongest roots. Her quiet courage only deepened Ilara's guilt. Adrian refused to answer hatred with anger. He personally visited the clinic, bringing supplies instead of sympathy. He quietly repaired shattered windows after vandals struck during the night. When frightened villagers hesitated to seek treatment, he escorted elderly patients himself, allowing his reputation to shield those too vulnerable to stand alone. Every act reminded Ilara why distancing herself from him felt increasingly impossible, yet even more necessary. Cedric interpreted Adrian's kindness as defiance. Determined to break the family completely, he arranged something far darker than rumors. One foggy afternoon, Oliver disappeared while returning from horseback lessons with Thomas, the estate's stable master. The old horse arrived home riderless, its saddle stained with fresh blood. Panic spread through the village like wildfire. Ilara collapsed to her knees clutching Oliver's scarf, while Dr. Ashcroft struggled to remain composed despite terror consuming him. Adrian needed no invitation. Gathering trusted riders, he followed hoofprints into dense woodland where swollen rivers cut through abandoned quarry roads. Broken branches revealed signs of struggle. A discarded wooden toy Oliver always carried confirmed they were close. As thunder rolled overhead, the search reached an old suspension bridge spanning a raging river. Across the collapsing structure, masked men forced Oliver toward waiting horses. Without hesitation, Adrian urged his mount forward. Weathered planks splintered beneath pounding hooves as fierce winds lashed the bridge. Steel flashed when one kidnapper drew a sword. Adrian met the attack with disciplined precision, disarming the man before another charged from behind. The violent struggle shook loose ancient ropes. Timber groaned. Half the bridge collapsed into the roaring current below. Oliver slipped. For one horrifying heartbeat, the frightened boy dangled above the furious river. Adrian threw himself forward, catching Oliver's wrist while hanging from the remaining beams. With extraordinary determination, he pulled the trembling child to safety moments before the bridge finally gave way. The surviving kidnappers escaped into the storm, leaving only shattered wood and unanswered questions behind. When Adrian carried Oliver home, exhausted and soaked by rain, Ilara rushed toward them with overwhelming relief. Gratitude filled every tear upon her face, yet the folded letter hidden against her heart remained heavier than ever. She longed to embrace the man who had saved her little brother twice, but fear chained her feet. Watching her silent struggle, Adrian quietly stepped back, offering only a reassuring nod before disappearing into the rain. From a distant hillside, Cedric observed the reunion with cold satisfaction, already planning a final move that would wound them far more deeply than violence ever could. Spring slowly softened the scars winter had carved across the countryside. Fresh blossoms reopened in Grandmother Margaret's restored garden, while birds returned to the hedgerows as though nothing painful had ever happened. Life quietly resumed, yet something fundamental had changed inside Adrian. After rescuing Oliver, he never mentioned courtship again. He never asked another hopeful question or searched Ilara's eyes for an answer she believed she could never give. Instead, he chose something infinitely gentler. He simply remained present. Every Wednesday morning, he appeared at Dr. Ashcroft's clinic carrying crates of medical supplies without ceremony. He greeted patients before greeting noblemen, swept muddy floors when volunteers failed to arrive, and patiently entertained frightened children while they waited for treatment. Watching England's most respected Duke kneel beside frightened toddlers somehow inspired everyone else to become kinder too. On quiet afternoons, Adrian shared tea with Grandmother Margaret beneath climbing roses. They discussed flowers, changing seasons, and forgotten poetry rather than politics or titles. Margaret noticed how naturally he listened, never interrupting, never pretending to possess wisdom he had not earned. She secretly thanked heaven for sending such a man into Ilara's difficult path. Oliver adored every unexpected visit. Thomas continued teaching him horseback riding, while Adrian patiently instructed him in chess beneath old oak trees. They laughed over impossible strategies, celebrated tiny victories, and occasionally lost spectacularly together. For the first time since losing his mother, Oliver's laughter rang freely across the estate instead of fading behind forced bravery. Ilara tried desperately to protect the careful distance she had built around her heart, yet ordinary moments became impossible to resist. She found herself walking beside Adrian through lavender fields after delivering medicine to distant farms. They repaired broken birdhouses outside the orphanage together. Some evenings, they read novels aloud beside the fireplace while rain whispered against tall windows. Other nights, she played gentle piano melodies as Adrian silently turned pages of forgotten music, saying almost nothing because silence itself had become comfortable between them. No promises were exchanged. No declarations interrupted the fragile peace. Adrian loved her without demanding reassurance, and that quiet devotion slowly became more powerful than any passionate speech could have been. The entire village began believing they already belonged together. Even strangers smiled knowingly whenever they appeared on the same road. Yet every peaceful memory carried a hidden shadow. Whenever happiness settled too deeply inside her, Ilara reached instinctively for the folded letter concealed within her gown. The paper had become worn along every crease, its edges softened by countless anxious hands. Her mother's final words remained as sharp as the night they were written. Fear still whispered louder than hope. Then subtle changes began unsettling her. While climbing clinic stairs, dizziness briefly blurred her vision. During long evenings treating patients, exhaustion lingered longer than before. One morning, after coughing into her handkerchief, she discovered a tiny stain of blood blooming across white linen. Her heartbeat stopped. She folded the cloth before anyone noticed and smiled through growing terror. She told no one, not even her father. Instead, she worked harder, believing exhaustion alone explained everything. Adrian sensed something was wrong whenever she paused to catch her breath or quietly pressed trembling fingers against nearby walls. Each time he gently asked whether she felt well, she answered with reassuring smiles that never reached her eyes. Late one evening, Amelia accidentally discovered the hidden blood-stained handkerchief inside Ilara's sewing basket. Then she found the folded letter lying beside it. Horror flooded her face as understanding finally collided with fear. She realized silence was no longer protecting her dearest friend. It was slowly destroying them both. Amelia did not sleep that night. She sat beside her bedroom window until dawn, reading and rereading the worn letter Ilara's mother had written with trembling hands. Every line overflowed with love, yet every sentence was built upon fear rather than certainty. The words never claimed Ilara carried the illness. They only warned that she might. Amelia realized her friend had sacrificed years of happiness to a possibility that had never been proven. The next morning she rode directly to Ravensshire Manor. Mr. Hawthorne welcomed her inside without delay, recognizing desperation upon her face. Adrian found her waiting in the library, clutching the faded envelope with shaking hands. Before she spoke, he understood the letter contained the answer he had searched for in Ilara's eyes since the night she rejected him. He read every word in complete silence. When he reached the final page, he lowered the paper slowly and closed his eyes. The woman he loved had never pushed him away because she lacked affection. She had believed she was protecting him from a lifetime of grief. Every cold reply, every painful refusal, every tear she tried to hide suddenly made heartbreaking sense. For the first time since childhood, tears slipped down Adrian's face without restraint. He grieved not for himself but for the lonely burden Ilara had carried entirely alone. Anger never entered his heart. He blamed neither Ilara nor her mother. Fear, he understood, could imprison even the kindest soul when wrapped in love. Quietly folding the letter, he thanked Amelia for trusting him with the truth. Then he made a decision that surprised everyone around him. He would not ask Ilara to believe comforting promises. He would find undeniable answers. Within days, Adrian began an exhausting journey across Europe. He consulted renowned physicians in London, professors in Edinburgh, surgeons in Paris, and medical researchers in Vienna. He searched ancient libraries filled with handwritten journals describing inherited illnesses across generations. Every clue led to another question. Every expert admitted that medicine had changed greatly since Ilara's mother had written her final letter. Possibility and certainty were no longer the same thing. Weeks stretched into months. Meanwhile, Ilara believed Adrian had finally accepted her rejection and moved on. The thought should have relieved her. Instead, silence settled over her heart like endless winter. She continued helping at the clinic despite growing exhaustion, convinced the blood she occasionally coughed confirmed her mother's terrible warning. Her father urged her to rest, but she insisted the village needed her more than she needed sleep. At last Adrian reached the estate of Dr. Helena Whitmore, a respected physician whose groundbreaking research focused on hereditary disorders affecting women. After carefully examining every medical record, studying Ilara's family history, and conducting extensive modern testing, Helena reached a remarkable conclusion. Ilara's mother had died from the illness, but there had never been evidence that her daughter inherited it. The fear had been understandable, yet medicine could now distinguish suspicion from fact. Every result confirmed the same astonishing truth. Ilara was completely healthy. Hope surged through Adrian with overwhelming force. He immediately began the journey home, carrying the physician's written findings together with the precious letter that had stolen years from the woman he loved. He imagined the moment her fear would finally end. But as his carriage raced through gathering storm clouds, another carriage vanished down a deserted forest road. Inside, Ilara struggled against gloved hands while a familiar voice quietly promised that before sunrise, she would belong to Lord Cedric Blackwell forever. The news reached Ravensshire Manor before sunset. Thomas found the abandoned carriage beside a lonely forest road, its door hanging open, broken ribbons scattered across the mud, and deep wheel tracks disappearing toward the northern cliffs. Mr. Hawthorne immediately summoned every trusted servant while Lady Sophia fought back tears. Adrian had barely stepped from his returning carriage when the blood-stained ribbon was placed into his hand. He recognized it instantly. It belonged to Ilara. Fear struck like lightning, yet his voice remained steady. Years commanding soldiers had taught him that panic rescued no one. Within minutes, riders spread across neighboring counties carrying orders sealed with the Ravensshire crest. Stable hands, village constables, loyal veterans, and grateful families whose lives Adrian had quietly changed all volunteered without hesitation. He had spent years giving kindness without asking for reward. Now an entire community answered that kindness with unwavering loyalty. Clues gathered quickly. A frightened shepherd remembered seeing armed horsemen climbing the old monastery road overlooking the sea. Fishermen reported unfamiliar boats waiting beneath the cliffs despite the approaching storm. Adrian needed no further confirmation. Cedric had chosen isolation, believing no rescue could reach the abandoned fortress before dawn. Wind screamed across the narrow mountain path as Adrian and a handful of trusted riders approached the ancient monastery. Waves exploded against black rocks hundreds of feet below, sending cold spray high into the air. The ruined walls stood like forgotten guardians beneath flashes of lightning. Inside, Cedric's men dragged heavy furniture against entrance doors while torches filled dark corridors with restless shadows. Ilara remained bound inside the crumbling chapel. Though frightened, she refused Cedric's demand that she sign a marriage contract. He mocked her stubborn loyalty to a man she had publicly rejected. Calmly, she answered that love did not disappear simply because fear forced silence. Cedric's expression hardened. He promised Adrian would arrive only in time to witness her becoming someone else's wife. A thunderous crash interrupted him. The monastery gates burst inward beneath Adrian's charge. Chaos erupted through echoing stone halls. Swords clashed beneath ancient arches while rain poured through shattered windows. Adrian fought with disciplined precision, never wasting movement, steadily advancing toward the chapel despite overwhelming resistance. Loyal companions protected fleeing servants and disarmed hired mercenaries, refusing needless bloodshed whenever surrender remained possible. Cedric seized Ilara and fled upward into the monastery bell tower. Adrian pursued without hesitation, climbing worn spiral stairs as fierce winds shook the aging structure. At the summit, lightning illuminated two men facing one another above the roaring sea. Cedric attacked wildly, driven by pride and desperation. Adrian answered with controlled determination, protecting rather than provoking, waiting patiently for one careless mistake. Finally came. Cedric lunged with reckless force. Adrian stepped aside, knocking the sword from his grasp. The unstable stone beneath Cedric's feet cracked apart. He reached desperately for support, but crumbling masonry offered none. His final cry vanished beneath crashing waves as darkness swallowed him forever. The danger ended, yet Ilara still trembled with another fear. She confessed she could not bear Adrian becoming a widower because of her. Before he answered, Dr. Helena Whitmore entered the chapel beside Dr. Ashcroft, Amelia, and Grandmother Margaret, carrying carefully sealed medical records. With quiet authority, Helena explained every examination, every scientific finding, and every reason Ilara's mother had mistaken uncertainty for destiny. There was no inherited illness. There never had been proof. Modern medicine confirmed she was entirely healthy. The words shattered years of invisible chains. Ilara collapsed into tears, grieving every season she had surrendered to fear and every wound she had inflicted upon the man standing before her. Adrian knelt beside her without triumph or resentment, gently taking her trembling hands into his own. "You never had to protect me from loving you," he whispered. As dawn's first light spilled through broken stained glass, hope finally entered the chapel. Yet before anyone spoke again, Mr. Hawthorne quietly handed Adrian a cream-colored invitation bearing the royal seal for the upcoming charity ball, the very place where two broken hearts had once been torn apart. 1 year later, spring returned to England with gentle warmth, painting the countryside in blossoms that seemed brighter than memory itself. The royal charity ball once again filled the grand palace with music, candlelight, and the graceful murmur of noble guests. Many remembered the painful evening when Lady Alara Ashcroft had publicly rejected Duke Adrian Ravensshire. They expected awkwardness if the two ever met again. None imagined they were about to witness a very different ending. Adrian entered the ballroom with the same quiet confidence that had always defined him. He wore no bitterness, no triumph, and no desire to prove anyone wrong. The only thing unchanged was the kindness that had carried him through every trial. Beside him walked Mr. Hawthorne and Lady Sophia, both smiling with hopeful anticipation. Across the hall, Dr. Edmund Ashcroft stood proudly beside Oliver and Grandmother Margaret, whose hands held a bouquet of freshly cut roses from the garden that had bloomed again after destruction. Then the orchestra softened. Every conversation faded. The great doors opened. Alara stepped inside wearing an elegant ivory gown embroidered with delicate roses, her eyes shining not with fear but with peaceful certainty. Around her neck rested a small silver locket containing her mother's letter, no longer hidden as a curse but treasured as a reminder that love deserved truth instead of fear. She walked slowly through the silent ballroom while every guest instinctively moved aside, creating a path that led directly to Adrian. He remained exactly where he was. He never reached for her. He never expected her to come. When she finally stood before him, tears shimmered in her eyes, yet they carried joy instead of sorrow. "I once believed loving you would destroy your future," she whispered. "Instead, refusing your love nearly destroyed mine." She gently took the folded letter from her locket and placed it into his hands. "My mother tried to protect me with the only knowledge she possessed. You protected me by searching for the truth." Adrian looked at the worn pages before carefully closing them again. "Your mother gave you love," he said softly. "She simply never had the chance to know hope." Alara nodded through grateful tears. Then she spoke the words she had carried inside her heart for years. "If there were only one man left in the entire world, I would still choose you." The silence broke beneath quiet sobs from guests who had once mocked them. Even those who had believed the cruel rumors lowered their heads in shame. They finally understood that strength was not measured by pride, but by the courage to keep choosing love after heartbreak. Adrian smiled with the same gentle warmth that had first captured her guarded heart. "May I sit beside you now?" She laughed, the sound bright as spring rain. "Forever." Thunderous applause filled the ballroom as he slipped a simple diamond ring onto her finger. It was beautiful without being extravagant, chosen because Alara had once told Oliver that the strongest treasures were those carrying honest meaning rather than dazzling appearances. Oliver cheered louder than anyone, racing forward to embrace both of them while Sophia wiped happy tears from her cheeks. Grandmother Margaret quietly whispered that the strongest flowers truly did bloom after cruel winters. Their wedding took place weeks later beneath thousands of blooming roses surrounding the little cottage garden. Oliver proudly walked his sister down the flower-lined path while Dr. Ashcroft placed her hand into Adrian's with complete trust. Mr. Hawthorne embraced them both like the family he had always wished to see together, and Mrs. Beatrice welcomed Alara as the daughter she had long loved before hearing the words spoken aloud. Years passed like peaceful seasons. Their countryside estate became a place where orphan children always found open doors, lonely neighbors discovered warm meals, and every traveler received kindness before questions. Alara remained healthy, filling the halls with music and laughter, while Adrian continued loving through quiet actions instead of grand speeches. Together they raised happy children beneath fragrant rose gardens, teaching them that compassion was the greatest inheritance any parent could leave behind. One golden evening, as their children chased butterflies across the blooming fields, Alara rested her head upon Adrian's shoulder. He looked toward the weathered wooden box preserving her mother's letter and smiled gently before repeating the same 9 words that had once echoed through a silent ballroom and ultimately shaped their entire lives. "Then I'll simply spend forever proving your heart beautifully wrong."